Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Z. I'm a clinical psychologist specializing in transgender care. Welcome to my channel. We are back to another Q&A. This is a series that I have started where I answer your direct and specific questions. So if you do have any questions for me that are specific to the situation, feel free to comment below, or you can directly email them to me the way many of you have already been doing. Keep in mind that your question cannot be diagnostic in nature. That's just would not be ethical for me to answer. But as long as it is general, I'm able to answer it for you. And hopefully the answer will help the rest. I noticed that this series is starting to get really popular, which I'm really happy because I feel like this is the best way to help you in the most, I would say, probably indirect ways that you possibly can. Having said that, what I have decided to do is I'm going to increase the number of questions in the series. So today, instead of 5, we're going to be answering 6 questions, and we're going to go from there and see how that plays out. Another thing that I got to say is that if you are wondering whether I'm actually going to answer your question at all, keep in mind that if you have commented and posted your question underneath the video content, if I have seen your question, because I apologize, there's chances are I may not have seen it, but I usually comment to every comment underneath videos, not the shorts, but the videos. If I have seen your question, then I always reply and I say something to the effect of, great question, I will answer in Q&A. And that's how you know that I will go ahead and answer it in Q&A. If you have emailed me, you're always going to get a response from me, either letting you know that your question is not ideal for Q&A and I will answer an email, or me letting you know that this is a good question and I will discuss it in Q&A. That way you know that your question will be answered. Keep in mind, sometimes YouTube has a funky algorithms, and some of you have been expressing to me that it has been wiping out your comments for some reason. I do not delete any comments at all unless they're blatantly hateful. So if your comment have disappeared, please try to just email me your question directly. I'm also putting timestamps for each one of the questions below. Thank you for the viewer who posted on the last Q&A series and made me aware of actually how to do the timestamps. I'm very low tech. My time is very limited, so I apologize. I tried to make these videos as kind of basic and efficient as possible. Having said that, okay, now that we're out of all the administrative things out of the way, let's get to the best part. Let's get to really answering the most pressing questions that you have, the questions that give you anxiety, that give you fear. As always, I'm blacking out everybody's names for privacy reasons. So let's go ahead with our first question. The first question is, do you by any chance have any explanation for why so much of the population has gender issues? I do. A Pew Research Center article, or Pew Research, not sure what Pew is, but okay, I'm assuming Pew Research article. Adults under 30 are more likely than older adults to be trans or non-binary. Some 5.1% of adults younger than 30 are trans or non-binary, including 2% who are trans men or trans women, and 3% who are non-binary. First of all, I appreciate you actually citing some articles versus coming up with a figure out of thin air, or putting out common misconceptions that people have that picked up from some other media sources that are deeply inaccurate. That's more than the IMH estimates for the world. Prevalence of major mental health disorders such as anxiety, 3.94%, depression, 3.49%, alcohol, drug, and disorders, 1.38%, borderline personality disorders, 0.51%, etc. So now you're comparing the data to other mental health diagnoses, saying that this is kind of odd because these percentages are way higher than a lot of other much more prevalent type of mental health disorders. I just cannot understand how 5% of the population could be transgender and likely have gender dysphoria. Even some other sources which cite figures around 2-3% still boggle my mind, to be honest. Valid question. And I noticed that, obviously, especially today with anti-trans stuff going on and everything else, there's a lot of people who legitimately are wondering, how is it possible that such a big segment of population is turning out to be transgender? And I truly think that that's a valid and normal question to ask. I don't think that it's transphobic or anything wrong with it. I'm glad that this particular viewer has posted their comment in a very mindful manner, really trying to seek to understand. So here's my thoughts on it. And I'll break it down into categories. So, 1, I believe that we're seeing an increase in trans and non-binary identified individuals because simply we are living in a culture where the language, the understanding of what gender is versus what sex is. Remember, sex does not equal gender. Sex, yes, is a biological fact. Nobody's disputing it. Gender, however, is by far and large is a social construct, and therefore an individual can feel a different relationship to gender than the one they were assigned at birth. So, because we live in a world where the language is expanding, the understanding is expanding, and we're seeing more people sharing their stories and sharing their narrative, what's happening is a lot of people, because also of increase of technology and increase of social media and increase of being able to get information on the internet, a lot of people are tuning in. The more people tune in and the more people learn something new, the more people are able to reflect and potentially apply it to themselves. Now, notice how there's a lot of cis people who are very comfortable with their gender, who tune in the whole bunch of transgender content, and it doesn't make them question their gender. Why? Because their gender is stable and they're comfortable in their gender identity. For a lot of individuals who never had language to express themselves, or never had an understanding, but had a nagging feeling that something was off-kill, but they didn't know exactly what it was, tuning in and suddenly hearing something that resonates gives them a broader understanding. Once those individuals have an understanding, they're able to have a deeper relationship with themselves and their gender, and therefore they become more vocal about who they are. Hence, the increase. This is one explanation. Simply, we're having in our culture today, we're having a broader understanding of what gender is, and our understanding really continues to shift. Explanation number two. I cannot tell you how many people I have seen in my practice who are older adults, I would say age 50 and up, who come to me, especially non-binary identified folks. This is just also to remind that non-binary identity is not a recent invention of some kind of gender ideology. People have been feeling non-binary forever. So I've been seeing these adults who are in their mid-50s, mid-60s, who come to me who say, I always knew that I did not feel comfortable with either male or female gender presentation. I couldn't really put my finger on it. I never had really words to describe it. But now, since I've been learning and reading about non-binary identity, now I understand that I actually have a gender identity that defines what I've been struggling with all of my life. Additionally, a lot of people are realizing they have access to gender affirming care they never had before. So a lot more people are coming forth, a lot of older people coming forth that have been struggling and have known their trans for a long time and have not done anything about it because they did not have access to care. So they stayed silent. Why would anybody, essentially, really, if you think about it, why would anybody want to come out and socially transition? Or why would anybody even want to be publicly out as trans unless they know that they can do something about it and get themselves into alignment with their gender? So you have to keep in mind that one, we're seeing the language shift and the context shift. And two, we're seeing a huge increase in older population of adults who have been silent for decades and decades because there was no accessibility of gender affirming care to the extent it is accessible today. So all of that will create the spike and increase in percentages that we're seeing. Reason number three. When we look at studies like this that yield 5%, 3%, 2%, you have to keep in mind that there are studies that are conducted in a particular how should I say it, in a particular saturated context, meaning they're being conducted and collected right now. Because everything is on a spike right now for reasons I explained in number 1 and 2. For that reason, the studies are going to yield drastic results. We have to wait. We have to wait for another decade for studies to kind of even out and stabilize and to even out that curve, because right now what we're looking at is kind of inflation, which is reasonable due to what's going on in the world. So that's how you got to look at the studies. And finally, the final point that I'd like to make is number 4 is this. Again, because we do have a lot of language available, we do have a lot of context, a lot of information available. Now there's a lot of young adults who are also questioning their gender. I want to be careful here and say that a lot of them are questioning their gender, and a lot of them do turn out to be trans and non-binary. Great. And a lot of them are going through a period right now where they're trying to figure out who they are, and they're questioning this part of themselves. And also, they are part of the studies, although the study you're studying are individual story and older, but the younger adults are parts of a lot of other studies. And people are looking at these younger adults as at their particular point of self-identification, versus looking at young adults as actually their core identity and whether they're doing anything about it. Because again, a lot of people are starting to think and understand their gender differently, and that's a great thing. But not everybody comes to conclusion that they are transgender or non-binary. So those are my explanation. Great question, because it is important to ask yourself why there's such increase, and that this is why it's such increase. It is not due to, in my opinion, some kind of gender ideology. If just think about it, think about just what I do. I work with adults, and I would probably say 80% of my private practice is settled about older adults and 20% are young adults. So 18 to 28 is only 20% of my practice. So I can tell you for a fact, I see so many individuals who are thinking and are struggling to make decision whether to move forward with their transition because they're struggling with gender dysphoria. These decisions, in other words, does not come easily to them. This is not something that an older adult just watched on TV news and said, oh my God, I'm trans, and its life is going to be so much easier living as a transgender person. I'm going to go ahead and spend thousands of dollars to transition. You have to realize that while maybe a much younger minds might be susceptible to start questioning themselves, even that susceptibility to questioning themselves still gotta lead somewhere. And we gotta trust that even young adults and people who are younger than young adults that I don't work with, also having some sense of intelligence, some sense of inner knowing. And if they don't, if they're minors, trust that there are individuals working to help them derive at that inner knowing. So that's a question. Great question again. Thank you for asking. And if anybody watching and they want to contribute something other than what I shared to why you think there's such an increase, please do so in the comment section. Second question. Hi, Dr. C. Just wanted to say that you saved my life. I was on the very edge, and I found your videos on YouTube when I was looking for something to focus on, and it changed my life. I am incredibly humbled and grateful that our lives intersected, and that whatever I said made a positive impact in your life. Because there's lots of shit out there that aims to hurt and really destroy, destruct, annihilate people, versus leveling people up and helping people to be happier, more in touch with themselves as individuals. My question is, so how do I reconcile who I truly am with the responsibilities I have as a husband and a father? My wife doesn't understand and is blatantly transphobic. Oof. So I simply hide the real me and play the happy husband dad. Ooh, this is tough, right? Because you feel, you're already telling me you have these responsibilities you feel obliged to maintain as a husband, and you have children. Your wife, on the other hand, who knows, or I don't even know if she knows, but she's blatantly transphobic. Either she knows you're transgender and she's just very blatantly transphobic to you, or she doesn't know that you're transgender. You haven't told her yet, but you are witnessing her reaction to the world and to what's happening in the media, and you're seeing her blatantly transphobic reactions. So you hide, oh, okay, so I simply hide the real me and play the happy husband. Okay, so she doesn't know, I apologize. Like I say, I read this question for the first time, so I never really have time to fully formulate. Okay, so this is what I gotta say. And I say it to all of you who are in the same shoes. You can't constantly be responsible and take care of everybody around you. Your responsibilities to your partner in your marriage or not marriage extends to this. You're responsible to be honest with them. You're responsible to be yourself with them. That's your responsibility. Your responsibility stops at being truthful. You're not responsible to take care of them. You can if you want to, and a lot of you do, and that's great. You're not responsible to take care of anybody. You're not responsible for their feelings. They're responsible for their feelings, but you are responsible and accountable to be honest and truthful in your relationship. And if your partner doesn't know and you know you're trans, you know what I think. I think that you ought to let them know. It is not fair to them that they have no idea. It's not fair. You have to give them a choice to make a decision whether they can be with you or they cannot be with you. You owe it to yourself and you owe it to them, even though it's really hard. When it comes to kids, your responsibility is to provide for your kids good environment. Remember what Winnicott said, a psychiatrist, I believe he was a psychoanalyst, who said you have to be good enough parent. You have to provide them environment, you have to provide them food, shelter, safety, so that they can mature in an environment that can support them. Again, your responsibility stops there. Of course, you can take on all other sorts of responsibilities if you want to. It's fine. But I notice that a lot of you who are in this situation carry this huge burden of responsibility on your shoulders as if you have to choose between yourself and your families. And it may feel exactly like you're making a choice. But when you're not taking care of yourself and when you're not taking care of your health and your health suffers, and your symptoms start to flare up and your coping no longer works to cope with gender dysphoria, you're not going to be fully present for your partner or for your kids. You're going to dissociate. You're going to be emotionally not there. There's a lot of other things that could be going on. You could be dropping all these balls you're juggling, putting your family and all your responsibilities that you care so much about into jeopardy. So I think it starts with being honest. And if you can't see a local therapist in your area to help you how to share this with your partner. But I can tell you this is not sustainable. Anybody who is watching this, who's been in your shoes, knows this is not sustainable. You know that phrase, you have to drink first before you pour it to loved ones around you. Another classic phrase is put your oxygen mask first before you pour it on somebody else. Why? Because if you don't, you can't assist anybody around you. Taking care of your gender dysphoria is like putting oxygen mask on yourself first. Remember, taking care of your gender dysphoria doesn't have to be full-blown transition, but it could be just addressing that you're struggling with gender dysphoria. So this is what I have to say. Please, everybody who's watching and have been in this situation and have perhaps a better suggestion, better advice, comment below, let this individual know, so that if you read those comments, you can have additional support. Question number 3. How can I break through the back and forth for SRS? SRS stands for sex reassignment surgery, or a lot of us clinicians like to use more gender informing vocabulary such as GRS, gender reassignment surgery, or gender affirming surgery. I've been on the fence as to whether or not to get bottom surgery. I've been thinking about it for nearly a year, and I can't decide either way. It doesn't particularly bother me what I have now, okay? But I do get excited by imagining myself with the other type, okay? I've seen people who have had vaginoplasty and they said they feel better than they expected. I'm also early in my transition, 9 months. So like you said in this video, I haven't reaped many rewards yet on my transition so far. How can I break through the fence and pick a side? This isn't the sort of thing you can say oops about, but I also spent 33 years avoiding transition, and I am mad at myself for waiting so long. Okay. So this is a great question for any of you out there who are on the fence for any other surgery and you can decide, perhaps you feel just like this individual does, doesn't particularly bother. In other words, you don't have really much of, or no dysphoria toward that particular body part, but then you get really excited when you think about surgery, but then you perhaps maybe get really overwhelmed and scared or whatever other reasons for deciding not to go ahead with the surgery. So how do you decide when you're on this fence? So I want you to be mindful, this person who wrote this, and to notice that you have to be careful not to be making decisions because of the years of waiting or regrets that you may have. You have to be able to make a decision based on your needs. Needs have to be primary, in my opinion, when it comes to such big surgery as vaginoplasty, and your wants are icing on a cake. Because you expressing not having much dysphoria towards your genitals, like I always say, it doesn't mean that you won't necessarily develop dysphoria towards your genitals. You are early in your transition. Having said that, as people go through their gender transition, as they start feeling more congruent with one part, gender dysphoria tends to increase in another part, which in your case can also happen. I see you being really back and forth, even in the way you write this. And when I see people who are so back and forth on something such as big as the surgery, the best thing is to sit down and to write down pros and cons. What are your pros for getting the surgery? I'll feel more authentic. I'll feel more comfortable having vagina. I will feel more connected to my body. I may eliminate potentially future dysphoria. What are your cons? What if I won't be happy? What if there's going to be complication? Whatever your cons are, write down pros and cons. Then take a highlighter and highlight how many of those pros are actually needs. What are needs? Needs are something that you need. Want is something that you don't really need. You can have it or you don't necessarily need to have it. So for example, if you put in your pros, it will help me or eliminate gender dysphoria. That's a need. If you put in your props that something else, that maybe potentially be a want. So highlight what are needs, what are wants, and then look at your list from a very logical perspective. Underneath, write down what is it that you're really afraid of moving forward with the surgery. Are you afraid that you're going to regret it? If so, write down what is it that you're afraid you're going to regret. A lot of times, a lot of you, what I notice is you're not so much afraid that you're going to regret that this is not for me. What I notice is a lot of you feel like you're going to, you're afraid the complications. You're afraid you're not going to get the results, ideal results you want. So I usually see the fear centering around results versus actually an overall outcome of a surgery. And results such as, what if it won't look aesthetically pleasing? What if it won't function as I want? What if I won't be able to achieve sexual pleasure and orgasm? So you got to write all the things down. A lot of people are not going to be, and you may not be 100% sure moving forward with the surgery. Because when we have all of the things in our mind space about fears and anxieties, 100% is going to be hard to achieve. But it is going to help you to have things on a paper versus in your mind. Why? Because your mind tries to grasp toward the most scary catastrophic scenario, and then it starts to ruminate on that scary scenario. Because it ruminates on that scary scenario, it gets out of its logical loop, and then doesn't look on the ways to solve the problem. All it thinks about is how to avoid the fearful things you're thinking about. Putting it on a paper actually helps you get back into your logical headspace. So this is what I recommend, but this is a personal decision, and take your time. 9 months is early. Is there's other things that people usually prefer to work on in gender transition? Again, it really depends. What are your goals? Are your goals to pass? Not everybody's goals to pass. Is your goal to feel more congruent? Is your goal to be what? What exactly are your goals? How does the surgery also helps you achieve those goals? So have all of that in mind. And yeah, take your time. I know that I always say that if you are definitely planning on a surgery, start consulting now because all the good surgeries are booked up. But in your case, you're not definitely sure you want this. So just think about it. Remember, a lot of trans women have not had bottom surgery and they're happy they did it, and they feel very comfortable with their genitals, or they just don't feel the need to go through it. A lot of factors play into this. So just give yourself some time, think about it, perhaps find a local therapist that can help you break down those fears and work through this and help you come to a better clarity. I don't really recommend jumping in the surgery when you're really that uncertain. It's just not going to serve you well. So That's how I would answer your question. Great question. So question number 4. I double printed, so you're trying to keep track. I've been watching your content since before I was able to get counseling. You were somewhat of a counselor for me while I was trying to figure myself out. Thank you, but everybody, please keep in mind, this is not substitute for counseling or substitute for psychotherapy. This is just like any other self-help book. You can read it, you can get some kind of general information, but it's general. And in order to find something that is really deeply connected to your particular circumstance, your particular situation, it is best to do some one-on-one work with a therapist. So, but I'm glad that the content is helpful to so many of you. If this has previously been answered, please connect me with the content. As more people are starting to use pronouns, I realize that I don't connect with any, meaning I don't feel any connection to pronouns, even though I respect everyone else's. I live in an area where madam and monsieur are more commonly used, including on the streets, and being seen as a madam triggers me more than pronouns before I'm constantly trying to pass for non-binary. Any tips for figuring out pronouns, or is there a better question I should be asking? This is a great question. So you identify as non-binary, you don't connect to any pronouns. You also live in a country where people are using madam or monsieur all the time, which are in some form or shape are kind of a pronoun, right? When they use madam, they implying a feminine, and monsieur, they implying masculine. Here's the thing. You're not the first person, and you're not the first non-binary person who doesn't feel like he, she, they, them, the other pronouns are not for them. Language is constantly evolving. Our lexicon constantly changing. This is what I gotta say. If there's no pronouns that resonate with you, then you haven't found your pronoun yet. Can you acknowledge that and accept it, knowing who you are, knowing what your gender is, and also accept and realize that contextually you live in a country where people use gendered pronouns such as madam and monsieur, and people will periodically apply one or another based on how their brain is going to pretty much assess or scan you for your gender markers. That's what our brain does. It's kind of inherent in all of us. And a lot of it is influenced by our culture, by our society, by our environment. This is very similar to question to a lot of non-binary folks who are living in US, and they get gender he or she, and they're not comfortable with either one of them. Unfortunately, non-binary identity is still, I would say it this way, it's interesting because I want to say non-binary folks are struggling to find their gender expression, right? They're kind of like the social markers that communicate to the world, I'm non-binary. So when you see me, just don't utilize any pronouns, be mindful, and we can just move on talking about each other without any use of the pronouns. And I have seen there has been a lot of articles, there has been a great article, I believe it was in the New York Times, about non-binary fashion, which has been this very nice combination of masculine and feminine. I think we're getting there. I think in general, we're getting to the world where people are becoming more gender aware in some parts of the country, even though it's still very slow, where a lot of more people, when they come across a person that they either can gender, they just don't gender them, or even if they can gender, they're more mindful about not assuming what their mind tells them to assume. The challenge for you is, can you accept and acknowledge and be comfortable understanding that you live in that context where you are being gendered as monsieur or madam? And when you go out the door, can you prime yourself? Priming is psychologically reminding yourself of something. Can you remind yourself that you are going outside and this might happen, and that it's okay that it's going to happen because people just don't know. They're not mind readers. They don't know who you are unless you tell them. If this is happening around people that you do know, please do assert yourself and do assert your pronouns and your gender. If this is happening around a lot of strangers, keep reminding yourself that they are not mind readers and they don't know. Just like you probably gender a lot of people that you see in grocery store or not, perhaps not, but I'm assuming maybe you do. See, just like I make an assumption about you. Do I really know? No. And if you do gender somebody in a store as madam or monsieur, you're also doing the same thing. But do you really know their gender? No. So this is the world we live in, and it's not personal. And it's important to realize that it's not personal. People don't know you unless you tell them. So the more you remind yourself that, the better off you're going to feel, the less attached you're going to be to that outcome, the more detached you're going to be, and the better off you're going to feel. But give yourself time. Your pronouns, maybe you may be able to find pronouns you feel more comfortable with down the road, or you may live the rest of your life never really feeling comfortable with one or another pronouns, and that's okay too. So hopefully that answers your question. If anybody's non-binary and watching and is having the same dilemma, comment below. Please share some input and what your thoughts are too. Fifth question. If I choose to not transition or move forward with any exploration, I choose my relationship and my life. What should I expect? I don't know. I really don't know. I'm not marking this by any means at all, but I really don't know what you should expect. I gotta say this. It is completely valid and legitimate to decide not to move forward. That's totally fine. It's totally fine to decide to not transition and to choose your relationship and your life. I do always, as you know me, if you are conscious about your gender, I do think that I want to say ethical. Ethics is not the right thing because we all have our own ethics and morals. I just think it's the right thing to tell your partner about your gender, even if you decide not to do anything about it. But you have a right to decide whether to explore your gender or not. What should you expect? How should I answer this for you? Let me tell you this. In a similar scenario of people who decided not to explore their gender, potentially what might happen, potentially, is this. Whatever you use or utilize to help you cope with gender dysphoria may potentially no longer serve as a coping. If it's no longer serve as a coping, as a result, your gender dysphoria may bubble over and you then may experience gender crisis or some form of gender crisis. So what I'm trying to say is that eventually things come out anyway. Now, of course, not for everybody. Some of you are really good at repressing content and really good living in denial and really good employing those methods. But in my opinion, that's just kind of unavoidable. I think that we can't hide from ourselves forever. In the very least, and I hate to be so dark and bleak, but in the very least, a lot of people have this realization when they're either having serious life changes, near-death experiences, or literally when they are on their deathbed and they're taking in their last breath, they realize they should have done this. So what should you expect depends on a lot of factors. What are your coping skills? What are your ego capacities? What is your ego strengths? A lot of things go into what should you expect. Can your dysphoria increase? Yes. Can you continue living with dysphoria until you die? Yes. Can you also continue to cope with it? Yes. Can you coping when they stop working? Yes. It all depends on what sort of individual you are. We're all very different. We're all coping with things differently. We all have different strengths and reserves. So it really should depend. I really want you to choose you. I do. But I know that you have to make a decision for yourself. And I will respect for every decision you have to make. To me, you see gender dysphoria, gender identity, not dysphoria, gender identity, the core of who we are is our potentiality. Whether it is in relationship to gender, to our careers, to anything else. For example, the core of who I am is to teach. My core sole purpose, I believe, on this earth is to help people understand things. I am very naturally good at reading complex material and breaking down into simple terms. And I have a logical way of thinking and a logical way of synthesizing information. So my sole purpose is to teach. If I were to do something else, I would be working off my path and I would be manifesting a lot of symptoms as a result of it because I would not be happy. We all know what it's like to do a job or to have a career that we're not suited for. We just hate it. We come home, we can't wait to have that glass of wine. We're miserable. We don't want to go to work. We can't wait for the weekend when we don't have to confront our tasks. And we all know what it's like to do things in life that you naturally inclined to do, just like this. Today, I'm recording this on Sunday. It's my day off. I'm sitting down and I'm enjoying answering these questions because this is something that means a lot to me, and I know it means a lot to all of you. That's what it means to love what you're doing. The same with gender. We all have a sense of who we are in relationship to our gender. And if we're not in touch with it, if we're not acknowledging it, we're walking on a wrong path. If we're walking on a wrong path, it's going to start manifesting symptomatically in so many unhealthy ways. And eventually something is going to have to give. So I just want you to think about that, okay? But it's not an easy question. I know that it's not an easy task. I know that a lot of you, just like that question number 2 today, a lot of you feel so much responsibility and you feel so responsible for everybody around you. And you feel like it's your responsibility to make everybody happy. And it's not. You have to start thinking about yourself. Remember, put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you can assist somebody else. So last question today. I think we're doing good on time. I don't want to make it this long, but I think six questions per series is good. Let me know if 6 is too much. So the 6th question: I have a ton of responsibility and can't get myself to put myself first. I mean, this is just segue into what we just talked about, right? So, sorry, I'm pulling the paper, guys. Okay, I have 3 kids and a wife, and I always put them before me. What did I just say? A lot of you feel everybody go first, I go last. And I'll actually explain why you do that. It's like putting them before me gives me an excuse to keep this to myself, and I'm tired, really tired. I don't blame you. So reaching out to many online, I have accepted I'm not cis. I'm not into self-diagnosis, so I will want to start with going to therapy. But from what others describe, I wouldn't be surprised to have gender dysphoria. I have many signs, so many signs. Question: beyond therapy being the first step, what do you recommend being the first step for adults who are 40-ish or 28 and up? First thing I recommend to all of you, regardless of your age. And this is recommendation in regards to putting everybody first and yourself second until you get like this person to feel so tired. The reason why a lot of you are putting everybody else first is because you have been living with gender dysphoria and you have internalized a lot of shame and guilt about your gender identity. You have internalized a lot of shame and guilt about your gender identity because the world tells you you are nuts, you're crazy, you're delusional, and this is selfish of you. It's selfish of you to pursue your gender. So you have internalized all of this garbage. When we internalize so much garbage, what happens to us is that we start disvaluing ourselves. Our healthy narcissism starts to suffer. Instead of being healthy, what I call healthy selfish, thinking about ourselves in a good, healthy way, self-care, taking care of ourselves, putting ourselves first. Because we devalue ourselves, now what you're doing is you're putting everybody else first. And the reason why you're putting everybody else first, because you have told yourself that I am unlovable, I'm unworthy, your value has plummeted. This is like a stock, right? Imagine that you are stuck in the stock market and you feel like your volume has plummeted because of all the garbage the world has told you. So what you're doing right now is you're investing all of your time and energy into somebody else's stock, being your family, your friends, your kids, your loved ones. Why you're doing that? The reason why you're doing that is because the more you invest time and energy, the more you feel like you are being loved, the more you feel like you're never going to be alone. The more you do that, the more you continue to devalue your own stuff. And you continue to de-appreciate yourself. This is happening to majority of all of you. And it breaks my heart to see this because you don't deserve to devalue yourself to such extent. All of you are amazing human beings. You have things of incredible value. I know this for a fact because I see and I interact with you. I see how you all help uplift each other and how you're supportive of each other and how you comment. And I see how you're constantly so incredibly generous with your gratefulness toward me. Why can't you do that to yourself? So my first advice is learn how to value yourself. Realize how devalued you have become. How do you learn to value yourself? You learn by starting to put yourself first. Maybe something small as simple. Start something small. Buy yourself flowers. Buy yourself something simple that you've been wanting. It doesn't have to be grandiose. Take yourself out for a body massage. Do have the therapy session with a therapist. Invest in yourself. You can never lose if you invest in yourself. Another thing that I gotta say is the other first steps that you can do beyond all of you gotta learn how to value yourself. This is why I love it when I see that when people start transitioning or just start embracing who they are, they start feeling that sense of confidence they never felt. And it's just so beautiful to watch the unfoldment of that, where people finally feel like, oh my God, I am worthy. And yes, you are fucking worthy. All of you are. You know who're not worthy? A whole bunch of a population that are just eager to destroy with their words versus to elevate somebody up, versus to help somebody, who are itching to say something negative, to break somebody down. So that's who is not worthy of things. So what you can do, therapy is great. Valuing yourself is amazing. Other things that you can do is start connecting to your community. Maybe you have a local LGBTQ center, start going to the groups. Maybe it's an online support group. Maybe it is some other form of community. Start connecting to other individuals who are in your shoes, because there's nothing like having another person who has a shared experience. It feels incredibly supportive. That's another thing you can do. How can you then also start working on finding a way to share this with people around you that you're struggling with this? How can you start trusting the unfoldment of the process, that once you are honest and authentic and truthful, the right people will maintain and be close to you. And the people who cannot be part of your truth, cannot be part of your authenticity, will make decisions right for them. And therefore, that decision is also going to be right for you. So those are the steps that I recommend. But really the most important step is to start valuing yourself and start recognizing that things a lot of you have internalized about yourself, the shame, the guilt, the sense of this idea that you're all selfish. You're not selfish. You're not selfish. You have a human right to be happy on this earth. You have a human right to be happy in this lifetime. And that starts with you starting to take care of yourself. Remember, oxygen mask on yourself first before you put it on somebody else. Great questions for today. Everybody, thank you so very much. Keep them coming. I have a lot of your questions. Like I said, if you get a comment from me saying great question, I'm going to answer it. You know that I have snatched it. I have a folder on my desktop where I have all the screenshots of Q&A. If you emailed me, you also would have got an email from me. Keep them coming. I love answering them. I think they're incredibly helpful to all of us to learn about the variability, how different we all are, and how all our problems are different, but yet very much the same, and to find little nuances on how to cope and deal with them. So comment below, share your comments and thoughts, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.